Good afternoon and welcome to the WP Quickies series, WordPress tips and tricks for WordPress in 30 minutes or less. Today I'm going to be looking at setting up a server cron job to make sure your scheduled posts and backups never fail. So if you're with us today, just drop a line in the comments, just let me know who you are and where you're from. Jean, hi Jean, one of our regulars, good to have you on board, and Morris as well. From sunny Sydney, it is sunny, nice and sunny outside. So sorry for any bizarre noises you might hear in the background. One of our neighbors is cutting his grass because it's such a nice sunny day. Alan, hi to you as well. Hi to everyone there. Thanks for bearing with me. Last week we went on a nice family trip to Canberra, so we had smashing weather. I did think about doing a WP Quickies when I was on holiday, but my wife said no. So I took a little bit of a break last week, but back into it again. Tipper, hi there Tipper. Just you guys, let us know where you're tuning in from, that'd be great. While you're doing that, just remember to, if you're watching on YouTube, just to click the subscribe button down below and ding that bell so you get notification when I go live next time on video. Paul says morning from Sydney's Northern Beaches. Oh wow, that'd be great. Northern Beaches. That sounds really, really good. Quite nice to just jump out in the beach. I quite like that. Okay, let's get rid of my horrible face. Who else have we got? Seven Circle Designs in Dallas, one of our other regular viewers. Thanks very much, Seven Circle. I hope everything's going well over there in Texas just now. You guys are rearing up for the election in a couple of weeks. I'm sure it's pretty manic over there. Okay, guys, I'm going to jump into it just so we can get this thing done quickly today. So it's all about WP Cron and scheduled events today. So let's just recap. What is a cron job? So a cron job, it allows you to automate commands or scripts on your site that require being triggered at regular intervals. So that can be specific events that need to be scheduled, like posts being scheduled or backups. The schedules can be anything from a one-time trigger or daily, weekly, monthly, or even a custom interval that you want yourself. Oh, Scott. Hey, Scott. Nice to have you with us. Thanks so much, Scotty. Okay, so WordPress. How does WordPress handle the scheduled events? Well, it handles scheduling in a bit of a bizarre way through a built-in service called WP Cron. Now, WP Cron, I'll be frank with you, it sucks. It's not a true scheduler because it doesn't check for jobs every X number of seconds. Instead, WP Cron is triggered whenever somebody visits your website. That's quite bizarre, isn't it? You wouldn't really think that would happen from a scheduler. And that's right, if nobody visits your website, then WP Cron will not run and therefore no scheduled events will happen. So have you ever had a post that has failed to be published on a schedule or a backup that mysteriously never ran? Well, that's WP Cron for you. If you've got a high traffic website, lots of visitors, then you may not have this problem. But for smaller websites with a lower amount of traffic, this can be an absolute nightmare. So what is the solution? The solution is to put in place a server cron job. So sidestepping WordPress a little bit. The server that runs your website, it's usually a Linux operating system, but Windows has this scheduler too. So these operating systems, they use a service called cron. And unlike WordPress, this service runs all the time. So with a modest bit of effort, you can create a server cron job to ping WordPress, hammer WordPress, and tell it to run any scheduled event. And this cron never misses a beat. So here's how to do that. The first thing you want to do is to disable WordPress's WP Cron. We don't want WordPress being in charge of running schedules anymore. So we want to add this following code into your WordPress configuration file. That's your wp-config.php file. And we covered that a couple of quickies ago, a couple of weeks ago. And so you'll want to add this line near the top of the file somewhere. It's definitely not right at the bottom, near the top of the WP config. And that basically tells WordPress just to stop using its own internal cron service, which is what we want to do in this case. So how do you set up a cron job? Well, if you've got cPanel or Plesk, it's really, really easy. SiteGround as well has a similar interface for it, but you'll find that most hosting companies will have a little icon somewhere that's called cron jobs or cron or scheduled tasks, something like that. And it just allows you to have a really simple interface in how you can set up these server cron scheduling events. Now on the left-hand side here, hopefully you can see that all right. On the screen, we have the control panel, the cPanel. So they've got a little icon in the advanced box called cron jobs. It's highlighted there. And on the right-hand side is a screenshot from Plesk. And they call theirs scheduled task. And you can usually get it from the top right-hand corner, or you can just type in scheduled tasks in the search box at the top of Plesk. So let's have a look at how to set this up in cPanel. So these screenshots are from cPanel, but it's usually very, very similar in other systems. Hopefully you can see that all right. The cron job interface allows you to specify any interval you want, right down to the second. In the interface itself, you've got fields for minute, hour, day, month, and weekday. So that allows you to specify everything all the way down to the second. So the minute is the number of minutes between each cron job run, or the minute of each hour in which you wish to run the cron job. And that's the same for hour and day and month and weekday. But let's get these super, super simple. We can use a common setting by using the common settings drop-down box just at the top of that interface there. And it lists some very, very commonly used schedules that people might want to implement. So things like every minute, every 5 minutes, every hour, every day, once per week, things like that. So in this instance, I'm going to set it up, or I like to use the once per 5 minutes option. So that's going to ping WordPress every 5 minutes, and just to say, run some scheduled events, run some scheduled events. So here we have the same dialog box, and we've chosen that once per 5 minutes. And you can see that it's set up, it's pre-populated all those fields in there for you. Now, I'm not going to run through all those fields. I think they're pretty self-explanatory, and you can look at that when you set up your own cron job. Just make sure it matches the one here on the screen. Now, the last thing to do is to set up the command that we want this cron job to run. Now, in this case, we're going to ping WordPress's wp-cron.php file. And the way we do that is by using a command called wget. And you can see it down in the command line there below. So let's have a closer look at that. So you'd enter this whole line in there, and we'll have a look at that in the next slide. And then you press add new cron job, and that's it. That's your setup one-time job, and it just runs forever. But let's have a quick look at that code. So here's the command line here. So this command line is split over 2 lines just to fit it on the screen so you can see it a bit better, but it all goes on one big line. So the wget is a command line program that retrieves content from web servers. There are 3 parameters in here. The first parameter is a -q. That's a lowercase q, and that turns on quiet mode. And it basically tells wget not to output anything to the terminal while it's running. The next parameter is wo. It's an uppercase O and then a space and a dash. And that really tells wget not to output anything to the file system. In this case, we're just basically pinging the file to make WordPress run that file so it runs the scheduled events. The third parameter is the URL that you want to ping. Now on the screen here, it's https yourdomain.com. Obviously, you're going to change yourdomain.com for your actual domain name. So if I was running on my website, it would be https://zeropointdevelopment.com/. And then the next part of the URL is wp-cron.php. So that's the cron file. That's a PHP file that WordPress uses to run the cron jobs internally. And then we put a little bit after we put a little URL query, a question mark, and then doing underscore WP underscore cron. Now that URL there, that whole URL, you can type that for your own domain into the web browser, and that will tell WordPress to have a look at any scheduled events and then run them. So that's what you use. Now, the last part of this command line, it's not an actual parameter to wget, it's a terminal command. So we've got a little chevron and then a /dev/null. That tells the terminal, the cron job that's running the command line, not to output anything to the display. We don't want to see any any messages coming out for the display. And the next part is the a little arrow, an ampersand, and a 1. Sounds really bizarre, but it's all Unix-based, all Linux-based terminal stuff. And that tells the cron job, the command line, not to output anything to errors. So what we have here in its fullness is WP-get in quiet mode. We don't want to write anything to the file. We want to get wget to run this URL, so it pings WordPress, the cron job, and then we're telling the terminal itself not to output anything to screen or anything to file. So completely quiet, no feedback at all. So if you add that to your cron job, then it will ping WordPress every 5 minutes. That cron job, WordPress will look at any scheduled events that need to be done and it will run them. So like clockwork, and this just runs and runs because it's a server command. It just keeps running until you delete it from the server. Now, of course, some people can do this, and sometimes it might not work. So if your cron job still isn't working, there's a couple of ways to figure out what's happening here. The first thing is to take that line, that URL address. Let's just go back. So the bit that says https:// and then whatever your website is, yourdomain.com/wpcron.php doing _w_cron, copy that into your browser, press return, and if you don't get an error message, then that's good, then that URL works. What you will see is just a blank screen. And to test it, what you can do is you can create a test post in your WordPress website, set it for scheduled, but 5 minutes before the current time so that it's pending, and then copy that URL into your browser, press return. You'll get a blank screen, which means it's working. And then you can go back into WordPress and make sure that post was scheduled, because you're pinging the WordPress scheduler manually. So that should have looked at the WordPress post, seen it needed to be published, and done that. So if that works, then the URL is okay, the scheduling system is working okay, and it means that something else that you've set up in that cron job or the command line is wrong. So go and have a look at your spacing. So wget, let's go back to this. You have to get all this properly laid out. So wget dash space dash q space dash capital O space dash space, then your URL, then a space with a chevron dev/null space to chevron _1. And I'll copy this into the notes down below, so you'll be able to see that properly. You can just copy that. Maybe I can do that here just now. Let's see. So there we go. I've copied that into the comments. Oh, Facebook didn't like that, but you've got that on YouTube. Yep, so you can copy that like for like. Yep, so if that still doesn't work, then I think the best way is to look through your server log file, see if there's any errors coming back, or ultimately, just send a support ticket to your hosting provider. They'll sort it out for you. But generally, I've never had a problem set up a WP-Cron. I've just schedule it for every 5 seconds, 5 minutes even, and then pop that particular URL, replacing your domain. I've never had any problem, and I get my schedule running like clockwork all the time. It's just fantastic. So that's all I wanted to cover today. It was a real quick quickie today, 15 minutes. So guys, if you guys got any questions about that, then happy to take some comments down below. Matthew's got one. Matthew says, would it be better to enable IP restrictions on where you could call your WP-Cron.php? I don't think so. It's not too bad. People calling WP-Cron.php, that means that your schedule is going to run all the time. But if you're putting in a cron job, Matthew, then it's running it every 5 minutes anyway. So I don't think there's any need to put restrictions onto that. But yeah, thanks for the question. That's a good question. Just having a look to see if there's anyone else. I can see that Jean's got a question. Just wait for it to come through. There's a little bit of delay between YouTube and the StreamYard that I'm using. So Jean says, if you monitor uptime, access to the homepage every 5 minutes for your sites with a tool like Uptime Robot, it's enough to trigger enough to the built-in WP-Cron, right? Okay, so if you have a website monitoring tool like Status Cake or Uptime Robot, Jean's asking, is that enough to make WordPress scheduler run around? It could be. It really depends on the way you set up your scheduler. So sometimes the Uptime Robot and Status Cake, you can define the way it actually pings your site. So if it's just looking at the port number 80, to make sure that that's working, then no, it's not going to ping WordPress, and it's specifically not going to ping that cron file. What you need to do, Jean, is to set up a cron job to specifically ping that URL with the wp-cron.php, because that's the WordPress file that's going to be pinging the schedulers all the time. So yeah, if you've disabled the WP-Cron, then yes, you need to hit that URL. So you just need to go into your uptime monitoring, and just if it's pinging just a port number, then no, it's not gonna run the WordPress stuff. The WordPress needs to actually load a WordPress page. So it needs to go through the index.php, do the WordPress setup, and then do all that. So yeah, just check your monitor. If it's pinging the actual website, that's fine. But if it's just pinging the port number or the server itself, then you'll know that's not enough to trigger a cron job. That's a great question, Jean. Thank you so much for that. Seventh Circle says it works, but can cause performance issues to use a monitor to run it. I've never had any performance issues with wget and cron jobs because it's running at the server level. It is super fast. I mean, if you open up a command line prompt on your server, if you do an SSH in and type wget, if you type that command in to like load a web page, it's lightning quick. It's super fast because we're not doing any processing. We're not doing anything with the file. All we're doing is just asking wp-get to ping that file, and the server will send it back, and there's no process or anything to do with that. With the wp-cron.php as well, there's very minimal rendering on the WordPress side. So it's super, super, super fast. Never had any issues with performance. But thank you so much for that question. That is super. Morris says, does this slow down the system? So yeah, I think I've just answered that one, Morris. Nope, I've never had any problems. And I run a New Relic on quite a lot of my client websites. New Relic is a server monitoring tool. So it tells you all the database queries, the speed, the PHP threads, the server performance, and cron never, ever, ever comes up as an issue with that. So I think you guys can put that to one side. It's not going to be a performance issue. Uptime Robot makes a head request, which may not trigger. Yep, that's great. That's going back to the uptime monitoring things. Yep, that's true. So that's just asking for a response from the web server itself to see if it's alive and not WordPress. Shared hosting prefers every 15 minutes usually. Yeah, well, you do have restrictions with shared hosting. You might have restrictions on the time limit you can set a cron job, but 15 minutes is better than no minutes at all, in my view. So if your WP-Cron's not working, if your scheduled posts aren't publishing, or if your backups aren't running, then yeah, even 15 minutes is better than nothing at all. But yeah, great point to make. Seventh Circle Design says using uptime robots means leaving native cron. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's all right. Thank you so much for those comments, guys. I think that's all the comments that's come through today. So that's great. I love your guys' questions. It's great. Keep them coming. Super. Okay, let's move on. So next week, I am going to be talking about privacy tools. So WordPress privacy tools that came with version 5, I think it was. So just going to do a quick delve into what tools WordPress has to manage people, to manage privacy and data retention, things like that. They're quite new tools, and it may not be super critical to us. I think it came more out of the GDPR, the big European directive a couple of years ago. But I think it's a good thing to have inside WordPress. You know, people want to be more open and know what information they have. You have on them. So yeah, going to do a little bit of a dive into privacy tools next week. So certainly join me next Thursday at 1 p.m. Sydney time. So just check the time if you're in Queensland or some of the other states, because we are in daylight savings mode at the moment. And guys, if you have any other topics or suggestions for WP Quickies in the future, please fill out the form. There's a link below in Facebook and YouTube to a form, and just give me some suggestions, give me some information, some inspiration about what sort of topics I can cover. Just keep it to like something I could cover in 30 minutes or less. It would be great. Thanks, guys. And as always, if you want to find out more about WordPress community in Australia, visit our website at wpaustralia.org. That lists all of our local meetup groups Australian-wide, and instructions on how to join our Slack group, where you can ask questions and chat with people in real time. So there are heaps and heaps of channels like business tips, code help, general plugins, jobs, Gutenberg, support, security, and lots more on Slack. So as well as asking questions on Slack, it allows you to just get to know people in the WordPress community, and helps you keep those social connections alive, those connections that we all miss from not being able to attend in-person gatherings. So hit us up on Slack, hit me up on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter as well if you want to have a chat with me. Otherwise, guys, I will speak to you on Slack and see you next week. So thank you very much for all your comments, all your questions, and until next week, see you guys.